budget. That should do the trick, right? It's actually come up with how the fuck do I budget my life. That's amazing. Thank you, traffic. Benefits of living right near a road. Let's try again, shall we? Hi, and welcome back to my little corner of the internet. Today we are going to talk about something that I was kind of nervous about, and that's budgeting. For a little bit of context, I have tried to do this many times over the years. I've tried quite a few times to do some sort of life budget so that I know what I'm doing, where my money's going, and how much I have coming in and out each month. And every time I've tried, I've failed. I have tried multiple different ways, different routes. I tried using all sorts of apps, spreadsheets, God knows what, and they've not worked. Not until now, that is, but we'll get into that. First things first, let's start with what actually made me want to try again this time, shall we? I, as you saw by my dramatic reenactment at the beginning of this video, I was online and I just had a bit of a moment where I decided, you know what, I'm going to see if there's any other budgeting tips that I don't know about. There's got to be something out there that helps. So I was just doing a good old search online. I just typed in, how do I budget? Actually, my little dramatic reenactment at the beginning was a bit of a lie. I didn't type that into Google, I typed that into YouTube. Because that's generally where I go first if I want to learn something, because more often than not you can, in a video format, I tend to find you can see a little bit easier how something's done, as opposed to sometimes written instructions aren't complete or aren't as comprehensive as they need to be. So I went to YouTube and I typed in budgeting, and I found lots and lots of videos. There's hundreds of thousands of them, all of them really good. Well, some obviously better than others, but I digress. I went through a few of them and I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole. I found down this rabbit hole of sinking funds, which is a term I hadn't heard before. And I, through that, ended up on some very specific types of videos, and they were cash counting for sinking funds. So it was people taking a chunk of money, either their monthly wage or like a bonus that they'd got or a gift, and distributing them between these sinking funds. And these videos are very similar in style. They're generally top-down view with the person talking as a voiceover, and they are physically counting the money out and putting it into these envelopes. And that was the bit that got me intrigued. A lot of these ones are done through envelopes, either paper ones or more often the little like plastic ones that you can see in planners with the little like plastic zip. Hang on, I've got one, I'll show you. They're like this, like these things with the little plastic kind of zip tie thing, and you can put them in like envelopes or envelope planners and things, and they're really useful. And these hold notes perfectly, they're about the right size. And I watched loads of people doing this. I saw lots of people doing this cash counting and doing it into sinking funds, and people have, some have a few and then some have loads and loads of these sinking funds. As you can see, the one that I've shown you has got a car on it. Obviously there's nothing in it at the moment, but again, we'll get to that. I'll explain what this is. But as I was watching these kind of budgeting videos, a name kept popping up, Dave Ramsey. I had no idea who this person was, no clue at all. However, time and time again, lots and lots of videos kept mentioning him and various books that he's written. And I thought, what have I got to lose? I've read quite a few different budgeting books over the years, or investing books and this, that, the other. Nothing's really stuck with me or just reached me in a way that's been long lasting. So I thought, right, this dude clearly speaks to a lot of people because he is mentioned in a lot of people's videos. Like he's a name that keeps coming up, so I'm gonna give him a go. And I gotta make sure I say it. I'm not sponsored by Audible. I've just been a customer for years. I went to Audible and I looked for his book and I found it. This bad boy. And it's only a very short book. It's like 2-3 hours ish. I had it done in like a day. It was amazing. It's the only book that I've read in a budgeting sense that doesn't do any sort of get rich quick. There's none of that. None of that at all. It is realistic. It is honest. Yes, there is a very high amount of Christian content as well. Dave Ramsey is a Christian man himself. His entire family is, as far as I'm aware. And a lot of what he does with money also coincides with his spirituality. So there is a lot of that that's reflected in his book. But as long as that isn't something that's going to bother you, it is a very useful book. It has absolutely changed the way that I view money, but more importantly, it's changed the way I view debt. And that's really what lit the fire under me to be like, no, I'm going to take charge for the first time in my life. I'm going to take charge of my money and actually make it work for me. And that was a huge step. This book had just given me a light at the end of the tunnel. So to give you a little bit of context, the book itself, again, as I said, doesn't give you a get-rich-quick scheme at all. It's a lifelong program that it gives you. So it's often referred to as the baby steps. That's what he refers it to as well. And it starts off with baby step 1, saving up £1,000 or $1,000 as an emergency fund, and then doing a debt snowball to get yourself out of debt. And then there's multiple other steps which then helps you to get wealthy. That's the whole thing. But it's like a 40, 50-year program. It's not oh, you'll be rich by the time you're 25 if you start this now. None of that. In fact, he says it in the book. He's like, it's very difficult to sell a book that says you'll be rich 40 years from now, but he's trying his best. And I just lapped it up. Absolutely lapped it up. And I now routinely listen to his podcast, which is an eye-opener. Sometimes you hear things on the podcast and it just reminds you that there's definitely people out there that have it worse than you, either through no fault of their own or through something that they did but they didn't realise what they were doing, or whatever it is. Student debt. Oh, don't even get me started on how ridiculous student debt is. I used that as my platform to start budgeting. So the first thing I needed to do was create a household budget. This is where I've got stuck every time. So this time I needed to do something a bit different. I decided to use a spreadsheet again, simply because it's easy enough to do. It does all the mathematics for you. I can do maths, I can, but I am not a super confident person with numbers, especially if you're trying to like do a lot of things all at once. So I thought, right, spreadsheet is the answer. I can put in formulas and codes and bits and pieces and get it to do the work for me. Where do I start with that? What do I need on it? What do I want on it? What will be useful? What won't be? If you look at any video on YouTube, you notice pretty quickly that there's no set way to do it, and everyone does it a little bit different. Everyone has different needs, so they tailor it to what they need, as you would expect. The problem is that then means that 9 times out of 10 there's no definitive way that you can get something that is going to work for you first time. And that was something I didn't realise before. I thought that it was just some thing that other people knew how to do, and I didn't. It was quite a big shock for me to really, truly realise, not just like in here, but in here, that I need to create my own budget, and I'm the only one that's going to know what I need for that. So I did the only thing I could do. I went and found a free template. I needed something to give me a baseline that I could then build on. So I typed into a good old search engine, free budgeting template, or something along those lines. I came up with this. This thing here is what I use to start my budgeting template. This is only one sheet. I use that, and over the course of about, I would say 3 or 4 weeks, I added to it, manipulated it, changed bits, added what I needed, removed what I didn't, and I turned it from what that was to this. Quite a big difference. The first one being that this is an entire year's worth. So once I created the actual month's budget, I then copy and pasted that for the whole year. So there's I think there's currently 13 tabs because I started at the tail end of March. But normally there would be 12, so it would be April to April, the fiscal year, the tax year, as it were. So I have my budget. I now have what I think is everything on it. It's quite comprehensive, so I've got all of my bills on there. I've got my current debts, and I have the sinking funds that eventually I will be feeding into, and that's where these come in. So the first couple of weeks where I used it in March, in fact I don't even think it was that long, it was probably like a week and a bit, so maybe like 10 days, I had the budget and I kept adding to it, and I would be sat at my desk at work and something suddenly would come to my brain, and I ended up having to have my planner by the side of me open at all times, and if I remembered something that I needed or wanted to add to the budget, I would put it in the planner, and then that night I would come home and add it to the template, and I just kept building and building, and as that was going on, I was adding what was being spent and coming in and trying to do the calculations to make everything get to a baseline, so it matched our bank account, so that I could, instead of having to just use my online banking or going into the bank or checking anything that way, I could use our budget to see what it would look like in a week from now, 2 weeks from now, next month. That was the plan. That's where I made my first mistake. We get paid strangely in this household. I get paid at the end of a month, so it's the last working day of a month, and my partner gets paid on a very specific date, but it's again also quite close to the end of the month. So while his date can only ever really change between 1 to 2 days, so they will pay him a day or two before if it falls on a weekend, mine can change by the space of like a good week, depending on if it falls on a weekend, how long the month is, and if there's any like special holidays going on, so like bank holidays, Christmas, those kinds of things. That made things quite difficult to gauge, and in the beginning I thought that I would be able to do it in a very similar way to how I see a lot of the American influencers that I watch do it, which is where they get paid, then they do their budget and they pull the bits of money that I want out, or they put their bits into a sinking fund. We can't do that here because we get paid at the end of a month, not at the beginning, and it meant that I was making some weird calculations to try and account for that, and it kept, things weren't quite adding up, is the long and short of it. I would put in our money that we would get at the time we got it. I would finish, hi buddy, I would finish that month, so it would be to the end of March. I'd start April, but I'd still be filling out parts of March in the parts of April in the March tab, and it meant that actually tracking what we were doing wasn't really working, and it took me until quite literally a week ago to work that out. So after doing a month and a bit of budgeting, I had to erase everything, start again. The template I kept because the template is ideal. It's got everything I want on it. I've now completed that to how I want it. Obviously, over time, I probably will add more things or remove things as needed, but essentially I've got the main kind of bare bones of what I need now. So that wasn't the problem. It was the way that I was doing the calculations. And when I worked that out, I had a bit of an epiphany, because that's where I've been going wrong the whole time. I need to work within the dates of the month, or otherwise I can't accurately track things. That sounds really stupid and like something you should work out for yourself. It should be simple. You should be able to go, oh, well, if I have a tab on my spreadsheet labelled March, I only put March payments in there. But I wasn't doing that. And I wish I could tell you a reason why I wasn't doing it that way. I was an idiot, okay? Don't do what I did. I was an idiot, but I've changed that. I've changed that now. So once I cleared everything out and redid everything and made any amendments that I needed to, I am now working within the month. So I'm kind of doing things a little bit backwards. I have to do our budget using the previous month's pay, which makes things a little interesting, but it's totally doable. Now that I can see everything, it makes things very, very doable. And in the space of a month and a half-ish, where are we now? Oh, I don't know. I've been doing this over a month-ish at this point. We'll just say a month and a half. And I can't remember the exact date I started. But in that space, from the day that I started doing this budgeting thing to right now at the time of filming this, we have halved our debt. Halved it. We've paid off 2 whole, separate items, and we've got 2 more. That was a fun one in itself, trying to pay off my phone. They almost refused to let me do it. But that's a whole other story. So yeah, that was quite a shock when I realised that we had this little bit of extra money that I could just chuck at our debts. So all in all, hopefully, we should be debt-free by June. I really hope we'll be debt-free by June. That's the plan. At that point then, we can start putting things in our sinking funds. And that's where things get really exciting. So the current goal at the moment for this year, it's a very, very low goal. I'm giving myself a very, very simple goal. I want to be debt-free before the end of the year, which we should be. And I want to have £2,000 saved. That's our emergency fund, or our buffer, whatever you want to call it. That's our goal. That is our current goal, and we are well on our way. So having a budget 100% changed everything. And goodness gracious, going through some of the payments as well from previous months, having a budget is useful because you realise where you're bleeding money. We were bleeding it on food. We didn't even realise it. We would go do our weekly shop. We'd be like, oh, we only spent whatever, well, let's say 50 quid. We spent 50 quid this week. Fantastic. And then on the weekend, we fancy a couple of beers. So we go get a crate of beers, or we'd grab a takeout. But mentally, we would still compartmentalise that as part of our groceries, even though it was a separate payment. And we were doing that a lot more than we thought we were. That was alarming, really, really quite alarming. And there were other things, obviously, that we were doing, like we were pulling out money sometimes out of the ATM that we weren't really accounting for in our heads. Just just the odd 10 quid here, 20 quid here. It's surprising how stuff adds up. And obviously with our debts and things, even though our debts aren't a lot, they are not a lot by any stretch of the imagination, because we were doing these extra things as well, we were not making headway. We were just stuck. We were stuck in this kind of hamster ball of just going round and round and round in a circle. I think that's ended now, or at least I damn well hope so. We've done really well so far, and bless my partner, he's essentially just given me the reins and gone, you know what you're doing, go for it. And he's put a lot of trust in me to do this, so I want to do right by both of us and get us out of this mess and get us some savings for the first time. I don't think in my adult life I've seen more than £2,000 in my account, ever. And that's really sad. I'm going to be 30 next year, and I genuinely don't think I've had any more than £2,000 in my account at any one time, like as a lump sum of money. Obviously I've earned way more than that, but that's a pretty good indicator of just how poorly we've been managing our money up until this time. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I had no sort of training or knowledge or anything, least of all at school, on how to manage money, how to manage finances, how to manage a house. You know, this is all stuff that I've had to learn on the fly, like most people do. And that's not useful to anyone. How can you expect people to just, here you go, here's some keys, go off into the world and find your way, make things work for you? Like, it's ridiculous. But now things are starting to go on track. And once we start to get a bit more money, we can then look into other things like updating wardrobes, houses, all the other bits and pieces that all my other goals this year all kind of hinge on us being able to manage our finances. And not just manage them, but manage them well. And that's a massive linchpin here. And hopefully you'll join us for the journey. Unfortunately, because this template that I originally used isn't mine, I can't give you my version of the template, but I have put a link down below for the original template that I used, and if you do use it, I highly recommend it. It is free, and it was a fantastic base for all the budgeting that I did, so if you need it, it is there. And it is not mine. I can't remember the name of the website off the top of my head, but I'll put them either up here or somewhere in the description, but they are fantastic. There's lots of different versions as well. They do household budgets, year budgets. I think they got some for business as well, so you can even have a look through the other ones that they have and work out what works for you. But thank you for spending a little bit of time with me, and I hope to see you soon.